Summer 2020 was a whirlwind for all of us, especially for those of us who chose to open our doors to the public and use every ounce of our leadership, creativity, perseverance, and resilience that we could muster. While we support our comrades that didn't open this past summer, and we will have a podcast just for you, today's podcast is about how 3 completely different camp programs were able to find a way to make it happen successfully in this crazy, historic summer of 2020. This is the Day Camp Pod. Welcome back, my friends, to the Day Camp Podcast. I'm Andy Pritikin, Director of Liberty Lake in the Philly suburbs of New Jersey.
I'm Sam Thompson from Crystal Lake Park District, Crystal Lake, Illinois.
I am Tiffany McDuffie, founder of Purposeful Play, operating out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Yes, and Tiffany is our new co-host. We're so glad to have you, Tiffany. Welcome. We are day camp professionals joining forces to provide a forum to share ideas and best practices across North America and beyond. And today is our first pod of the COVID Craze 2020 postseason, and we'll be spending the next chunk of time together discussing the ins and outs of this historical summer. So, when we left off, our heroes were trying to find a way, right? And I was just remembering a little today that awful Groundhog's Day feeling that we were having back in like April and May, where we were waking up every day and we didn't know, number one, if we'd even be allowed to run, and then number two, how the heck we were going to do it. But you guys remember that feeling, that it's helplessness, right?
Yeah.
The feeling of helplessness.
Totally. I remember thinking, not only were we going to be allowed to run, but what was going to happen in our personal lives? What was going to happen with the lives of the families that we serve? So many crazy uncertainties. But apparently we found a way to forge our way through. So it's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So in regards to all those families, right? And this was definitely a year that we really learned to empathize with people, right? Because everybody got different situations at home. So leading up to the season, communicating with the staff, I'm curious what you guys did. I'll talk for me for a second. I felt it super important, basically from like mid-March on, to communicate by email with every one of my like stakeholders, which I felt was like my enrolled camp families and my families that didn't yet enroll from the prior year. So I sort of lumped them together. They were one email. And then the inquiries, my leads, who I was trying to keep in the oven and like, don't leave me yet, like we still, kind of thing. And then my staff, like I felt, I think a lot of camps were forgetting their staff during that time because they didn't know what to tell them. And they thought that it's better not to tell them anything wrong. So I just won't talk to them. I didn't think that was smart. So I was doing an email every single week, which transitioned after a while. I transitioned to YouTube videos. And I thought that was a good personal way to do it, to actually see my face and my smile while I'm talking to you, to try to put that forth like that. And then as it got closer to camp, I switched to Zooms because then, I have 300 people doing. But I'm curious, how did you guys sort of frame the whole communication?
Well, for myself, I run a before and after school program. So we were in mid-session when everything shut down. So we had to do a lot of communicating on were they going to get those 2 weeks refund now or later? And we were going, everything was unknown week to week. You had to communicate because you didn't know what was happening the next week or when they were reopening and whatnot. And then I did start sending to past camp people as we got a little closer. We didn't end up opening up until after July 4th. So my staff finally knew about mid-June that they could come back and that we were going to go ahead and open. So again, a lot of communication. I did not hire anyone new. It was all past staff, but I was able with the new ratios to get all of them back employed. So that was always a goal.
Yeah, that's great.
For me, it was also just very topsy-turvy. Being such a small program, knowing, who I could keep on, what I could afford to do, what students were or what campers were actually going to come back. We actually do run before and after school programming as well. So we are usually pretty insulated in terms of protecting our revenue from knowing, the kids that are there when school ends are going to continue on. And when we got shut down, well, not personally our program, but when the city shut down, parents just automatically assumed we were closed. So that communication was key, and just like communicating to them, no, we're still actually going to function. This is how we're going to keep kids safe. these are the protocols that we're taking. And at the same time, it's kind of like this, just like major positive thinking. This is how we're going to keep kids safe, but not really being sure, 100% certain that we could do it. And so I'm just very grateful to those families that stuck with us and, helped us forge through this summer with no incident. And for our staff, just grateful that they were hanging on, not knowing you might have a job, you might not have a job, you might have some hours, you might not have some hours, but you believe in our mission, so stick with us, sort of thing. And, everyone really did work together, and we did that thing. So
yeah, we did that thing. And not that our staff would really get another job unless they wanted to work for Amazon or a supermarket necessarily, but they didn't have to work for us. They did not have to do this. And a major shout out to all those frontline staff that worked at camps this summer, because man, and not only is it impressive that they worked here, but think of all the high school and college kids, right? Think of their parents that allowed them to work at our camps. Seriously. Man, those people deserve a hug from me after COVID is done. Is it a post-COVID hug?
And I totally sympathize with the few that felt that they weren't safe. I had a few parents of college students who felt they needed to keep them home, and that's fine too. And they felt so guilty about that as well. So just trying to let them know that was okay as well.
For me, I think it was quite the opposite. I had no staff who wanted to stay home. And for me, it was like they knew that they needed to work this summer. So they were grateful for the opportunity to be able to work and in a setting where they could actually be impactful. I was probably more nervous than them. And so I think that for me, it was more so educating, okay, COVID is real. So we have to follow these very different protocols to the letter of the law. Even things like switching groups, how we ordinarily would have, that wasn't allowed. Your group had to be who your group was. If you ended up with only 2 kids for that day, yes, we're still paying you for just being with you. And as a small business owner, that was rough, right? But it was like safety over everything. And so, shout out to all of them.
Yeah. And one of my favorite COVID camp moments was the first day of my all staff orientation, where I had, 250 people show up at my place. So we had all these grand plans and people were coming in. And this was the first time that these people had like interfaced with other people besides maybe like the cashier at the supermarket, right? In 3 or 4 months. And they came in. I remember this one person said, Andy, I don't know what we're doing for the next 7 hours, but I don't care. And I don't even want to go home. Like, this is so great. I'm so happy to be here. And that sort of summed up to me how camp was for the whole summer, not just for the staff, but for the campers who came to us and for the parents who sent their kids to camp, that they were just so happy that we were up and running that it didn't really matter what we were doing, and I was just on a phone call with a bunch of ACA, New York, New Jersey camps, and up from Maine down to Pennsylvania. And some of these camps were talking about how they shrunk their programs literally down to, they were doing 5 things at their camp, 5 things. That was it. And nobody complained. They were all good, right? Because everybody's expectations went down. And in a way, we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but I think that the true essence of camp came out this summer for those who ran it, right? Because we realized we didn't need all the bells and whistles, right? So in your little world, Tiff, most people understand what I run this big, private day camp, and Sam runs this big, rec program, day camp, multiple locations, but it's generally there's one facility with a lake and all. Can you tell everybody again, because you were on a podcast a year ago, but can you just give everybody like a quick synopsis of what your program is so they understand where you're coming from?
Yeah, so we, Purposeful Play, it's an inner city camp, so we consider it like an urban day camp. We run programming kind of like the healthy and active alternative to daycare for school-age kids. A lot of the kids we serve haven't been to camp, and camp is not something that their families grew up going to, so it's a new experience for them. And we kind of we say we're a sports camp, we kind of use sports as a shiny object to draw them in, because that's what kids like, but then just like dish in the magic of camp and the social emotional skills and the empathy and resilience and all those sorts of things. And so, hey, our world isn't tiny. It's tiny, but it's mighty. No, I'm just teasing. But no, I do agree that this year brought out all of the graciousness. I mean, I had children who were introverts by heart, self-declared, and they were just like happy to see people. I think the hardest thing for us was just like not hugging and not touching and not high-fiving and not doing all of those very hoorah-rah things that we were accustomed to. So that's how we fared our way.
But tell us what it looks like facility wise, like, you know, as we start talking about the whole COVID stuff.
So facility-wise, so typically our campus is ran out of Washington Park, which is in Milwaukee. It used to actually, years ago, I'm told, be the Milwaukee County Zoo, so a huge park. The park was not issuing permits this year, though, so we were forced into our own building, which we usually only use as an inclement weather facility. It used to be a church, so again, we're inner city, so we had to be really innovative with how we do things. So the church sanctuary is actually a gym. And so we literally use that, and then the grounds adjacent to the church and the school buildings for our outdoor play. And, you know, we are licensed by the Department of Children and Family in Wisconsin. So there is a requirement for our programming to be oriented to the outdoors. So as much as we wanted to stay inside in our little bubble, you know, and not really interact, you know, public facing, we had a requirement to be outside a ton. And for the kids, it was good to just get out, and we had to just be really inventive. We did things like, you know, a drive-in in the backyard of the church. We did water balloon piñatas. We used the trees as our props for a lot of things. We're usually really huge on field trips because our program is all about experiential learning and kids getting beyond their block, beyond their neighborhoods, and into their city. And this year we had to really be a cocoon of our own and, you know, make it fun. And so we were able to really bring out that magic that I think happens in overnight camps, just right in our, you know, we own the full block, which I'm grateful for. We weren't pushed out like some people who operate in schools and that sort of thing, but literally from 24th to 25th Street, from McKinley to Belite, those were our stomping grounds. And we made it happen. Lots of smiles, lots of laughs. And so
well, really lots of creativities, Tiffany, lots of creativities. That's what that took. So at what point did you start thinking about like all these crazy new ideas in order how to pivot like that? Like, and was it like, do you have people that you work with? You're a small organization, like you said, in many ways, you're like a one-woman show, right? So like, who were you bouncing these ideas off of that was helping coming up with these great solutions?
We have always been all about community, and the YMCA and the Urban Ecology Center are two of our community partners that we truly relied on for like, hey, what are you guys going, like, not to operate in our own silo. So we were definitely able to knowledge share with the camp professionals from those organizations that are much larger than us. Also, just Pinterest became our best friend. You know, we were like running camp for, if I had 15 nieces or nephews.
Yeah, Pinterest.
Yeah.
So Pinterest was a thing. And then, you know, what else was really cool and able to be used as a resource? All of my favorite like thought leaders in the space in terms of sports camps. So like Box. I think it's something ran by Reebok. Marathon Kids, it's sponsored by Nike. That even my gym, Orange Theory, all had like online classes during the day from March until camp started. So we were just like borrowing best practices left and right. That looks fun. That looks fun. That looks fun. You know, we roll with it. Our theme for the summer was Mamba mentality. So it was kind of an ode to Kobe Bryant and just his tenacity to get through rough times. And we were in a rough time, right? And so we're just like, all right, how do we make it, when we make it fun, it gets done. And so that's what we did.
So Tiff, with you being licensed, you probably had to do a reopen plan that had to go to the state when you opened too. So when we start talking about precautions, at least that gave us a framework for what areas we had to hit when we were doing those precautions to open up.
They did give us a really good and clear guideline on what we needed to do. They were great. I mean, honestly, you know, people talk about politics and government negatively all the time, but they were on top of it. And I don't know where they were borrowing best practices from, but they certainly gave us like talking points for parents, what we needed to do. We had, you know, we had temperature checks, and we had questionnaires, and that stuff we really did not have to make up on our own. So that was really great, and I felt really supported by them. Sometimes we can look at them like, stay away, you know, leave us alone, get out of here with your rules. But no, this summer we felt really, really supported because I think everyone, you know, nationwide just had a common mission as a human race for us to stay safe and alive. And if we could bake in some fun, you know, like even better, at least the kids would get out of that social isolation that they have been in all, you know, the end of their school year abruptly.
Yeah, I think we're really fortunate to be in 2020 and have the resources at our fingertips. You know, I think about when I was younger and you basically had the Yellow Pages, you know, and Encyclopedia Britannica. And now to be able to be hitting up Pinterest and reaching out to all these other organizations. And I do think that that was a big part of this 2020 season, was how camps came together. Right, that camps, at least regionally, what I saw, were really bonding together, even when they were neck and neck competitors, because you know they just wanted it to work. Because God forbid if you ran and it didn't work out and you ended up being one of those headlines, you know, like that was the one thing you did not want to happen. So it was in everybody's best interest to support everyone. And I got much closer with many of my colleagues that I only had, like, you know, acquaintance kind of relationships with. We became, all of a sudden, we were in the bunker together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it
So
was,
very true. We had gotten really blessed with a ton of media at the end of last year. We had kind of almost had like a 6-week cadence when Purposeful Play was on the news. Purposeful Play is in the news. And I would tell my staff on a daily basis when reinforcing safety precautions, we do not want to be on the news as a COVID camp. Like, no.
mm-hmm.
We were able to say, like, we've got good press, you know, like, let's keep this thing going. So that was motivating, but also like a crack of the whip at the same time.
All right, so let's get like rubber to the road then. Okay, so yeah, we all didn't want to be that camp, so we had to talk about some of the things that we did. So I'm going to talk about some of the things I did. Let's go around. Let's do some like highlights of some of the precautions that we had to take. Right, so we actually did busing at my camp. We're one of the few day camps that I know that did busing, and we had all staff and kids wear masks on the bus. We had the windows open, just, you know, a little bit on Sundays because we did have air conditioning in there, which comes standard on the buses I get, which is pretty cool, even though they're school buses. And that worked out fine. We had one kid per seat, unless they were siblings or in the same corn circles, then they could sit together. So basically in a 54-seat bus, we might have had 32 tops on a bus. So I ended up having less kids, although not that many less kids, but I ended up having 5 more buses than I normally have, which is a big expense. But that was fine. I didn't mind that because I ended up being able to go into Philadelphia and some of these areas that I wasn't able to get to in the past. Food service we ran. I ended up hiring a really experienced chef to oversee my team of food service people, because I just wanted somebody with a ton of experience to be in charge. You know, this was not for the novices. This whole situation, we did everything all individually wrapped. Everything went out to every person, you know. There was no buffets, there was no salad bars, there was no family style anything, right? The staff had to work extra hard. You know, my frontline staff, normally we empower the students big time, like to be able to clean up for themselves, bring things from here to there, fix things, all that kind of stuff. But this year it was all about the staff having to do that, unfortunately, which put more, you know, stress on them on already stressful summer. And then on top of that, my middle management leadership team, they had to really they had a lot more stress because they had to be the social distance police, right? And make sure that those young people stayed on task, you know, and did all the things they needed to do. In regards to cleaning, you know, we had a clean team set up. We hired extra people. They were cleaning up the tables, you know, nonstop, all the things that you touched, the doorknobs, all those kind of things that were just on a constant rotation. We had backpack, electrostatic cleaners that were being used regularly, especially at the end of the day when we pretty much did everything at one time. They came in, you know, very handy with all that kind of stuff, no doubt about it. Assemblies, we still did assemblies. We felt that was an important part of what we did, but we figured out ways to spread people out. And we figured out ways to keep people in circles. We built a stage on the end of a field and then drew circles on the field and spread people out in their groups of 20. We were allowed to have 20 kids in a group. So that's just a taste of some of the stuff we did. So I'll pass the mic.
My favorite thing that we did was not having the parents in the building. You know, they would stay in their car. We would go out and they would self-report temperatures and the 3 questions that we asked and sign them in. And then the child would go in with us. And believe it or not, I think that was a lot calmer for them and us throughout the day. We did packets for each counselor of art supplies and things that they normally would share as a big group, so that they had their own equipment, so they didn't have to share it and keep cleaning it. The funniest thing was I have 2 school sites and 2 park sites. My directors bought utility belts and put their spray bottles of bleach water through their belt. It looked like they were gunslingers. And they were the ones doing the doorknobs and, you know, the common areas in between. We would schedule our playground time. So each group of 8, we had 2 counselors to 6, 2 to 8, 2 to 10, depending on the age. And they each had their own times on the playground, and then they'd wipe the common areas. We did a lot of what you did, except for we did not have any busing. So then later on, I'll talk about how we had to come up with other resources that we could walk to still make it exciting. And because of not having those breaks where we were doing swim lessons or doing trips, we had to do a ton more art projects and big games that we haven't had to do in years. So we kind of went old school. And it was really nice, like Tiff said earlier, to keep the group of 8 children together. I think they actually built better friendships having to stay together than they did when they had so many choices. But I'm sure we'll get into that again later.
My favorite precaution was really not well, we did all the standard things. We did the temperature checks, we did the questions, we did the, send someone home right away. We did temperature checks actually a few times a day. The hygiene stations, the cleaning, all of those things. But the most fun that we captured was for the littlest ones, we used hula hoops to help them learn about social distancing, and we used the pool noodles to help them understand what 6 feet looked like. And so, that was very cool to see them do. And then, it was a bit of a cost in order to have them have their own individual equipment, because again, now everybody needs their own basketball, everybody needs their own soccer ball. But in a ways, how for years we have pushed so much teamwork, you don't need all those, everybody works together. Now everybody was able to be the star. Look what I can do, look what I can do. So in those ways, we were able to make it fun and colorful and meaningful. And then also for their mask, because we required kids to bring their own mask, but the ones who didn't bring them, we had temporary masks. So then they would color them to make them their own, so that they kind of were personalized. And also, again, really for the little ones, because it's just such a transition for to wear a mask all day. It's hard for us, so it's terribly hard for them. Just that little bit of pride and ownership that I created this mask, and now this mask means something, was another fun way that we helped them to be really precautious this year.
We started putting ribbons on the masks so they could wear them around their neck at the times that they were allowed to take them off, because the very first day, oh, I left it at the picnic table. Oh, I left, and they were losing them. So that was nice. They always had them on their body and could just flip them up, when it was time for them to put it on again.
Yeah.
That's a really awesome idea.
Yeah, temperature checking multiple times in a day, huh? But don't they run around and they get hot? I mean,
so
isn't that?
We did it, but one day we had a kid who was just like, I'm too hot. We tried our best to make sure that they were hydrated, but also we were just overly precautious. We did not want to be COVID camping. We wanted to make sure that that the kids were safe. So we did do it. We did it in the morning when they arrived, before lunch, and then at the end of the day, to make sure how you came is how you left, and midday, right. Let's check in and see where we are.
And how many? What was the most kids you had in a given week?
35 max.
And then how about staff?
So we were 10-1, so 3 or 4 staff people during that time period.
And how about you, Sam? How many kids and staff on a given week, your highest?
Each site was 35 kids, but I still had 80 staff between the 4 sites, because I did 2 to 6, 2 to 8, and 2 to 10. And then we had some subs just in case, because we did have a lot of college students right before they were supposed to come back that tried to squeeze in a vacation, but they squeezed it in somewhere that was a hot spot. Yeah. So then they couldn't come back for 2 weeks until they quarantined. We did need a lot of substitutes.
That was fun. I think New Jersey, you can be from like 5 different states in the country and not have to have a 2-week quarantine at this point. It's really a bummer.
Yeah.
So we had 700 kids a day for most weeks with 250 staff. So temp check-in that many people first thing in the morning was enough of a chore, I gotta say.
Oh, gosh.
But we pulled it off. We had normally we have 2 nurses on staff, full-time nurses. We had 4 this year, and that was a huge boon for us. And yeah, really very helpful on so many things. So I just want to mention that we're going to put in our show notes. I have a safety playbook that I got collaborated with, but with a bunch of other camps. Major shout out to former guest of the pod, Adam Wallach from Mohawk, and his buddy Charles Maltzman, who did a great job with the playbook, and I used that as a template, and it was really awesome. Because for moving forward, we're all going to need something like that. That's for sure. So what about, I mean, with those numbers being so relatively small compared to what you normally do, I mean, did you have huge waiting lists? Did you have to keep people out? You know, how is that?
We didn't have huge waiting lists. We didn't do a ton of marketing, which we typically do. Our parents were scared. You know, they were scared to their kids, and I wasn't going to be the voice to say, no, send them. This is an absolute guarantee of safety. You know, we were all
no, I can't do that.
Best. And so I didn't even, you know, I'm huge into marketing. I'm huge into messaging. I'm huge into one-on-one connection. And I just was nervous myself to talk people into something that they weren't comfortable doing. And so we kind of just let people go with their comfort zones. And then we just tended to the needs of the people who had the most essential work needs. And we just decided, you know, usually we never have 80. We usually have like 10 to 15 coaches, maybe 20 on the high end. And again, we were down to a bare bone staff of like.
Understood. What about you, Sam?
I could have had 50 at each site, and I averaged around 35. So I didn't have to worry about closing out. Although I will say a lot of the people who did choose to come to camp this summer weren't my normal people.
Right.
I got a lot of new faces and new situations, which then hopefully then we'll have them going forward.
Yeah. So what about like 2 summers ago, Sam? What would be a typical day at your program?
About 400 kids a day.
Right. So that's a serious change.
Yes.
To say the least.
I usually have about 120 to 150 kids at each site.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting how different areas of the country felt differently about sending their kids to camp. So here I am in New Jersey. This is a relatively small state. And in my neck of the woods, I could have had 2,000 kids if I wanted to. Like, you know, there was just kids falling out of the trees that wanted to come to camp. And same with my friend Gary, who is just east of me. But in North Jersey, camps were running more like 30-40%. And the same thing in the New York tri-state area. There's just a lot more people that were scared, as Tiffany said, or not only that, maybe they had other options as well. I think I serve a lot of essential workers and a lot of people who they needed to go to work. They needed a place for their kids and all. And in my situation, the vast majority of my competitors decided not to open, which led to just like the floodgates getting opened up. And basically from the last week of May to the first 2 weeks in June, I must have given 100 tours with my son in masks at my facility because people were just, they felt that the risk of sending their kids to camp in a pandemic was much outweighed by the reward of getting their kids out of the house, playing with other kids, being outside, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's very interesting how that goes. So in regards to the media, were any of you guys hit up by the media in the spring or the summer? Or were you guys utilizing the media at all?
I didn't get hit up like you did. I did want to comment one thing that you were just talking about. A lot of what I thought were going to be essential workers were out of work, my low income. So we had a lot more unemployment up here than I thought we were going to have. But that was kind of an interesting twist. The other thing was a lot of my people that would do punch passes, so they'd come 3 days a week or 2 days a week or just for field trips. I couldn't offer that because I had to keep the group static. So there was no coming and going. And I think that changed the whole texture of my camp a little bit. But Sorry, I digressed. Go back
No,
to
it's okay. I just want to touch, now that you've gone off the road a little, I want to go off the road a little too, in that in most of the camps I spoke to in the Northeast, speaking for day camps in the Northeast, it was pretty much that 1/3 of the kids at your camp, those parents would sign their kids up if the camp started tomorrow. Didn't matter what was going on, zombie apocalypse, whatever, right? Then there was 1/3 of the camp population that said, I don't care what safety precautions you're taking place, I'm not sending my kid to your camp in an astronaut suit, right? And then the middle third was sort of like, we don't know what to do, right? That seemed like across the board what it ended up being. And sort of the same thing with like people who wanted refunds versus rolling over and stuff like that. So I think that so half of my population was my campers from past years, but half of my population was new people. You know, I joke around, I say refugees from other camps that had nowhere to go. And we gave them a home for a year. So yeah, very, very interesting. So in regards to the media, what about you, Tiff? Because you're so media savvy. Were you staying away from them, or were you utilizing them?
So honestly, they hit us up before camp started. But once it was going, you know, we didn't have time to breathe to even like pitch. And they didn't hit us up to say like, what are you doing? How does it look? No, that didn't happen. I think that they'll be interested in doing some sort of recap, because as we look to enter fall, now that we're in fall and there's all the e-learning going on where kids are once again being socially isolated, and, you know, campus being used as a safe space to navigate that e-learning situation, you know, maybe there's some opportunity for us to talk again there. But again, I was so nervous that I don't know what I'd have said. You know, I don't know what I would have, hey, we're doing our best. You know, like, let us know we'll let you know once it's all done. So now that I have good things to report, I'm all about it. But yeah, we were deep in during summer camp, so we didn't have media.
Yeah. We were fortunate in that because I had been so prominent in the media in the lead up to camp that that they all wanted to know how it was going. But interestingly, like I feel like the media is missing a lot right now in following up with the camps and talking to the camps that were able to succeed. You know, just today, I've received a half dozen text messages and emails from my summer staff who are now back in the classroom telling me how awful it is back at their schools, how unprepared they are, and how camp was just so much of a safer, better situation in dealing with this whole COVID thing. So I think we have a story to tell, we camps that opened. And I think that, you know, it's sort of sad that schools aren't hitting us up and the media's not hitting us up, and we can't be sharing our success with them and telling them how we did it.
We just got to reach out and let them know. I mean, the media need feel good stories to fill in the gaps of all of the craziness that they share. So
yeah,
I did get one media request for the e-learning, just asking how it was going to go and all that before we started. So it'll be interesting to see if they follow up on the e-learning that you and I both are still running and how that goes.
Yeah. So just for those of you that don't know what these guys are talking about, camp has not ended for them. Right? Their summer camp, quote unquote, program ended, and then on Monday they started their next step of their fall, whatever they're calling it, e-learning or whatever. And
mine is endless summer.
Yeah, and shout out to Mike Stilson out there in Valley Trails in California, and all the other camps that are trying to make it go with their facilities. You know, Everwood Camp, which I'm associated with up in Massachusetts, they ran this summer with about 300 kids a day. They're trying to pivot to a kindergarten program in their town because their town, it's half day and it's all virtual, and people want their kids out and doing things. And I think with all of the nature programs that are out there now, that camps now have they have an environment for learning even throughout the year. You know, if you dress right. You know.
Absolutely. No bad weather, only bad clothes.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, so Sam, I hear you're going to be doing more water sports down your lake potentially.
Yes, now I'm looking towards next summer once I get back at the lake, because only my teen camp got to go this year. So I want to, I was going to pick your brain on what there is to put in the lake to make it more exciting.
Well, that gives us a wonderful opportunity to talk about CRS, Commercial Recreation Specialists, the fine purveyors of the best recreation solutions to keep camp going strong. They actually have this great product, this affordable product called the Zoom Flume, which I'm a big fan of. Basically, it is a giant, and when I say giant, I mean giant, like 25 feet long kind of thing, slip and slide. And the thing is, you blow it up like you would blow up a moon bounce or something like that. All right, except you don't have to keep the blower on it. You just blow it up and cover it up and all. And then you just keep a water source going on it, like a hose. And then if you want to add bubbles or whatever, you can do that. But you just keep a water source going on, and then the kids get a running start and they go diving on it and they go flying into the pool or the lake or whatever you got there.
Now, does that go ground or does that go on water?
It goes on the ground.
Okay.
But so that you can go into the water. Now,
okay.
you could, it's inflatable, so you could throw it out into the water and you'll have the world's biggest raft, 25-foot raft. That's a great idea. Hey, CRS, you hear that? We are expanding the use of your Zoom Flume. See, that's what we're talking about. All right.
That'd
so anyway,
be perfect.
Yeah, it's a cool, check it out. Check out CRS, the number 4 rec.com. CRS is serious about fun, and check out that Zoom Flume. They usually have them at all the conferences. Not that we know if we'll have a conference anytime soon, but It is what it is. So, let's take a moment, get out of the weeds for a second. Let's just talk about like how awesome it was. Like when you were walking around in the middle of the day and seeing happy children smiling and singing and laughing with happy staff, like with all that buildup, with the months and months of torture, right? To then all of a sudden have camp going. Like, to me, it felt like a dream. It felt surreal. Like in a way, I didn't want it to end. In a way, I couldn't wait for it to end. But in a way, I didn't want it to end because it was just so beautiful. Because it was just like, you were so happy to be seeing just such basic emotion and such basic happiness.
It was amazing how the kids adapted too. I really think that the kids were more on board with everything than their parents were, or than even my staff were. They really adapted. They wanted to be there. They loved being there. We had to interject things like walking, the 2 schools had to walk to the park that was about 30-minute walk away for these little guys to do a splash pad and to do sand volleyball court. They could play in the sand and fish off that pier. So you had to be creative with things when you weren't busing. But they were just as happy to be doing all that and doing multiple art projects and the old new games that we used to do.
I remember the first day at camp, I went up to the arts area, and because we changed our schedule so that it was a completely, it wasn't as much electives as we would normally have here. We had big groups of 20, and then we would allow that group to make 2 choices within that group. Like, so one would be like a street ball kind of game, and the other one would be something that was like a specialist run. But the first day at camp, I went up to the art tent, and I saw 3 groups of middle school boys making art projects, making like bead necklaces and things like that. You had never seen happier children in your life than these big jocks making these little bead necklaces. They were so thrilled. And it was like you said, when you come out of 4 months of house arrest, basically, okay? Like, yeah, I mean, you're just happy to be free, right, at that point. And that was sort of my theme the last couple of weeks of camp, trying to keep my staff on target and focus and all, is look at these kids and just think about what they're about to go into now for the next X amount of months, because most schools are virtual, and most schools are going to be partially virtual. And the ones that are starting virtual now, I don't think they're going back in the classroom in the middle of the winter. Like, that seems extremely optimistic. But you never know. So come next June, this might be the next time that those kids are going to be experiencing that kind of happiness.
Absolutely.
What's so funny is, so I didn't spend a ton of time on site at camp. So I was actually moving from Milwaukee to Chicago. And so the days when I was there, I definitely was like celebrity status, like Coach Tiff is here. And it's funny because like when camp was starting to ramp down and kids were starting to go back so they could get ready for school, I would get random text messages like, please keep camp open. It's so funny. I'm like, I'm not closing camp just because I'm they used to see me, they're so used to seeing me there every day, all day. And because I had my own responsibilities, I, had delegated a ton of things. And they're like, we love you for having this camp. Please keep camp open. And these are children who participated for the last 2 or 3 years, so they're not new to the space. And I don't think they ever said thanks for having camp. But this year, they were just like,
Oh yeah.
I think there's like this fear of it going away. So
Right. For those of us that ran camp this summer, the level of appreciation felt by our camp families is off the charts.
yeah.
Yep. An attitude of gratitude that we hadn't seen in a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really awesome. I'm still riding that wave. That is so great. So one of the things that I was trying to push on my camp community all summer was social responsibility, right? So, it started when I toured a family at one of them refugee families who was really nervous about sending their kids to camp in the first place. Mom was super upset the whole time, like on the verge of a breakdown. And you could tell that she was just completely torn about it. And then a week later, they signed up their 2 kids for the whole summer. And I couldn't believe it. And I reached out to the father and I said, I'm so surprised, your wife seems so upset about the whole proposition. And he said, you know what, Andy, we have decided that camp is so important to our family that we are literally going to quarantine ourselves for the 7 weeks that our kids are at camp. And we're not going to see any relatives, any friends, anything, because the camp experience is so important to our family that we're going to make that a priority. So I told that story to my other camp families, and many of them were like, wow, that's a great idea. And we're going to do that too. And that was one of my themes during staff orientation, because my camp started about a week after one of those horrible situations that we all read about, the sleepaway camps down south, right? Where their staff came in and they all had COVID and all that kind of thing, right? Because out partying or whatever. So I just kept on pushing that. And so many of my staff, were so happy for the summer to end in a way, because they hadn't really seen any of the relatives, any of their, friends. One of my top, this is Kathy Fisher, who was on a podcast, my social worker. She has 90-year-old parents. She couldn't see them all summer. It was so sad. I thought that was a very interesting aspect to our summer.
The parents were really good about letting us know ahead of time if anything was going on, and they were really good about pulling them out for the 72 hours, even if they had one symptom. So if they had the stomach flu the night before, or they were out for 3 days, they did not bat an eye. They were very, very cautious with us, which was wonderful to see.
Yeah,
How careful
I think a lot of our colleagues that didn't run their camps this summer were scared because they thought their parents were going to be irresponsible. Right. And we're going to be sending sick kids to camp. And like you said, Sam, it was actually the complete opposite. I was getting phone calls and emails at 6, 7 in the morning with a parent saying, my kid came home with a sore throat yesterday, and he woke up and he still has it. I don't feel comfortable sending him to camp. I'm going to go get a COVID test. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, okay. Yeah. You really don't got to do that, but yeah, that's the kind of attitude that people had, because just like Tiff was saying, she didn't want to be the camp that was in the newspaper. These families didn't want to be the family that caused the camp to blah, 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 right? Yep. So nobody wanted to be in that ballpark. But I just want to touch on that we did actually have a case of COVID, right? We had a staff person who was one of the most responsible young ladies at the camp. She wore a mask even when she didn't have to, according to our guidelines. And she went out with some friends for her 21st birthday, just met some friends at some place. And the next week, her friend called her and said, yeah, I have COVID. You should go test yourself. And then she did a rapid test and tested positive, which now we think, by the way, was a false positive, because no one in her family tested positive, no one in her group, none of her friends. But unfortunately, what it did is that it reverberated through my camp, and it created like a stress and anxiety way more than I could have anticipated, because even though a lot of people read about it and know somebody that knows somebody that got it and kind of thing, turns out very few of my camp community actually knew anybody like closely that got tested positive until that moment. And then with the stress and the weight of all the pressure of the summer camp on top of them, it was a tough next week and a half. And I would venture to say that about a third of my camp went out and got tested. And fortunately, all of them tested negative, which was great. And all the kids in the group, the poor little group of 12 little first grade girls, they all went home for 2 weeks. They all tested negative. Everyone in their family tested negative. The co-counselor tested negative. But it was an interesting peek into it's going to be like in the schools, frankly.
Yeah. And Andy, did you do refunds for whenever somebody had to miss a few days? Or how
Well,
did you work that?
if you're talking about staff, or you're talking about families?
Families.
Because if staff missed time and it's COVID related, we had to pay them.
Right.
And supposedly we can claim it as a tax deduction on our taxes, right? That's some kind of federal law. But in regards to the families, yeah, I mean, I took the approach this summer that I was just going to be super liberal when it came to refunds and time off and this and that. And I was going to have to be flexible with that. You know, if people were taking that kind of precaution, then God bless them, right? I wasn't going to, penalize them for doing that. So that was my approach. Yeah, big picture.
Yeah, looking at long term. If we're good to them now, they'll be back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did you do it, Tiff?
Yeah, we kind of just went completely with the flow. We were very liberal also. There were not many instances, again, we're state funded, so there weren't many instances where the parents were seeking co-payments, refunds from that. And if our staff wasn't feeling well, they just took off and still got paid. This is like not the summer to be fussy about the little things. We were just, again, I think just the whole rapture of graciousness around, we're here, we're well, we're happy, it's fun, was enough for us to just be like, all right. And again, we're so small that it's more like family than to, don't get me wrong, we missed, like last summer, I think we had like 220 kids enrolled. That's huge for us. So literally to go to like 35 was just like, how are we going to make it?
Yeah,
so we
seriously.
We were easy breezy.
All right. Well, the last thing I want to wrap up with before we do our day camp tip of the week, I just want to talk about the silver linings a little bit. Like moving forward from this experience that we had, I really do feel that it was an extraordinary experience for making a simpler schedule and removing the bells and whistles and going back and basically creating a camp situation like it was 100 years ago. I think that it brought back the essence of what camp really is, which is just kids being outside playing and having a good time and not being so worried about the next program thing that they had to do and the super jazzy whatever the heck it is, and seeing the appreciation from these kids from just that. And I think that we're going to be fortunate again, because we're dealing with an unfortunate year right now, that we're going to have that opportunity again in 2021.
Yeah. I think it made my staff more well-rounded too, because before they could play to their strengths and they never had to check out their weaknesses. And this year they had to be a jack of all trades with their group. And they actually found some things that they loved that they would have never tried. And now they know they love them. And so now they can kind of do the whole well-rounded thing.
I agree.
Yeah, I definitely feel like, it's already a space where when it's a small camp, you can feel like, you have ownership. So you can be counselor, you can be marketer, you can be, all the things that you are when you're a camp counselor in terms of running the totality of the program. But this year certainly made us have to like wear multiple hats, wear them well, be flexible and adaptable to the ever-changing situation, and just, keep graciousness top of mind, as well as just being precautious as ever,
Yeah.
No longer if we were doing the right thing because of what licensing might say. It was more so like, this is life or death.
Yeah.
And we operated out of a lot of fear, you know what I mean? But it wasn't fear that stopped us. It was fear that propelled us to do more of the right thing and to pour in heavier, to make sure that nothing could stop it from moving forward. So,
And with all the precautions, I think we had less overall plane sickness, the normal kind of sicknesses that happen in camp in the summer. Most of them didn't happen because of all the stepped up cleaning and hand washing and whatnot.
Yep. Yep. I also think that the staff, like we were alluding to, wearing different hats and being pushed to the limits, it was sort of a great example of when there is a common goal that everybody is focused on, a greater good, how people can go far beyond their expectations, you know, and their limitations, you know, and I think everybody felt like this was a fight and we were going to do this and nobody thought we could do it, you know, and it was just that, you know, and everybody was just all pumped up, you know, throughout the summer. Yeah. And then very sad when it ended. Holy gosh, people were, I've never seen such upset people at the end of a summer to this year. Oh man, back to the front, all these poor folks with their online learning and all that stuff. All right, so before we get into the day camp tip of the week, all right, and Tiff, you got to come up with one, all right? All right, so you'll go third, so you got time. So I just want to say that we had some crazy weather in the Northeast this past summer. We had 2 tropical storms come through, and one of them completely destroyed my main 40 by 80, this is what we eat under, tent. And fortunately, I am a client of AM Skyer, who was one of our gracious sponsors. And they just stepped up. I called them up. I said, AM Skyer, I see all those advertisements you put all the time with all these crazy stories about people's dining hall burning down and all this kind of stuff like that. Guess what? I finally got one for you. Okay. I'm outdoors. And my tents are destroyed, right, with this tropical storm. And yeah, they got on the horn and found me a rental, you know, the next morning. And I had one, you know, out there the next day after that, all put up and all. Unfortunately, we had good weather and able to do that. But it just goes to show you that it's not just lip service, that when you have a great insurance broker, you know, in those times of need, it really pays off. So I want to thank AM Skyer for being so awesome as insurance people and also as our sponsors. All right, day camp tip of the week. I'm going to go first, do it really quick because we're running out of time. I did a new parent orientation, a returning camp parent orientation, and a whole bunch of staff orientations on Zoom. And man, was it great. It just was so convenient, especially for the parents, to be able to watch these Zooms. And then after I did them live, and I had to expand to the 300 person one because I couldn't believe the amount of parents that were trying to get on. I put them up on YouTube afterwards also. And then so if parents missed it live, they were able to just watch the YouTube link. And I've never had that kind of compliance. Now, granted, we're running a camp in a pandemic, so you're going to have some compliance on me talking to parents. But yeah, I think that's something I'm going to be using for the future. You know, for the convenience of my camp families.
Nice. All right, so mine is a rope with pool noodle sections on it. So what the purpose of that was, first of all, we chopped up a pool noodle like 2-inch sections, and they're hollow. So then we ran a rope through it and spread them out every 6 feet. So when my kids were walking anywhere, they would hold on to their pool noodle on the rope, and they were 6 feet apart. And so everybody was social distanced, and then they could, you know, take off their masks when they were social distance going on the walk. The other thing we used it for, it was great for relay races and things, because if you put, you know, your, whatever the goal is at the other end, you'll lay it parallel to what you're going to have them run, put the ball in or whatever, they know to come back to their noodle. And so they've got a visual for both ways, and it worked out really good for games. We used pool noodles for tag so that they didn't have to touch each other. We used them for a lot of things this summer.
Well, one other pool noodle thing I just want to add on. We use pool noodles with ropes through the middle to create separate areas for kids to swim in at the lake, because we had to keep the groups separate, no commingling. So that was our best use of pool noodles this year. But I like the pool noodle idea, Sam, with the social distancing. Just it sort of correlates with Tiff's hula hoops.
Yep, it does, definitely.
So my tip would be a little bit like Andy's in terms of our staff training though. We did like a hybrid virtual training and in-person training. And so all of the kind of like monotonous things that we needed to get through, like snakes and trees and, you know, that sort of stuff that people are always notoriously sleeping through in person, we were able to do that stuff online, and then we were able to make it more interactive because we use I don't know, it's not called what is the survey one called where they can respond?
Survey
Caboodle?
Monkey?
Survey Monkey.
No.
MailChimp, no.
I lost the name of it, but it's something where they can like.
Oh, Kahoot?
Yes,
Kahoot?
Kahoot. And so we were able to use that, and it almost seemed like people were just far more engaged in stuff that totally were usually like, ah. So doing that hybrid and kind of getting some of the sticky stuff out of the way with the coaches or the counselors really worked well for us. And then doing all of the in-person stuff, the games, the training, the stuff that requires us to see, feel, and touch, just doing those in person. So it was a great use of time, and it made us able to get some of the stuff done while the coaches and counselors were still away at school. So we didn't have to wait for everybody to get on site first.
Yep.
And then I think my second one would just be the keeping the kids together. You know, we always were great at letting kids switch and try different counselors, just try it on. But I think, like Sam said, it created a sort of bond and a family within, you know, camp and within their own group, because they had the same coach or counselor all summer long, and they were with the same group of kids, so they were able to form deeper bonds. So that's something that will keep going beyond this pandemic year.
Yep.
Me too. I really enjoyed that.
Yep. We had a lot of that making lemonade out of lemons kind of vibe all summer. All right. We want to thank our Go Camp Pro support team and our dedicated sponsors, AM Skyer and Commercial Recreation Specialists, for allowing us to bring this podcast to you. And if you don't want to miss an episode of the Day Camp Pod, then you should subscribe. And if you like what you're hearing, give us a nice rating and share it with your friends. And check out our show notes from this and other episodes at daycamppodcast.com, as well as contact information for our show, our guests, and our amazing co-hosts, Sam and Tiff. So thank you for listening and making yourself a better day camp professional. We'll be back real soon with another episode of the Day Camp Pod.